There's a woman named Sarah, and she carries within her something that our world has almost forgotten. In a time when everything feels complicated, when every solution requires a subscription, a premium package, or a complex formula, Sarah stands before us with 5 simple ingredients. 5 simple ingredients. But this isn't really a story about a morning ritual, is it? This is a story about coming home. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of modern life, if you're tired of searching for expensive solutions to problems that feel impossible to solve, then this story will change everything for you. Make sure to hit that like button right now, because what I'm about to share with you goes against everything our society teaches us about transformation. Sarah was 47 years old when her world fell apart. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a foundation, until one day, everything just crumbles. She was a mother of 3, working full-time, managing a household, caring for aging parents, and somehow trying to hold it all together. Sound familiar? Her mornings began with checking her phone before her feet hit the floor. Her days were filled with rushing from one obligation to another. Her evenings ended with her collapsed on the couch, scrolling through social media, looking for something, anything, that might help her feel like herself again. Picture yourself for a moment in the marketplace of modern solutions. Rows upon rows of promises, each more elaborate than the last. Labels with concepts you can't grasp. Prices that make you wince. Solutions that feel foreign to your soul. Sarah had tried them all. The expensive morning routine course that required 47 different steps and cost $297. The productivity system that needed 3 apps and a color-coded calendar for $89 monthly. The wellness program that cost more than her monthly grocery budget at $189 per month. The mindfulness subscription that sent her daily reminders she was too busy to read at $19.99 monthly. When did transformation become so complicated? When did we start believing that the answer to our struggles had to come from somewhere far away, cost a fortune, or require an expert to understand? The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. Sarah was running late again. Her coffee maker had broken. Her youngest couldn't find his homework. Her teenager was having a meltdown about an outfit, and her phone was buzzing with work emails that couldn't wait. As she stood in her kitchen, surrounded by chaos, holding a piece of burnt toast and fighting back tears, she called her mother. "Mom," she whispered into the phone, trying not to let her children hear the desperation in her voice. "I don't think I can do this anymore. Everything feels so hard. I've tried everything, and nothing works. I'm drowning in my own life." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then her mother's voice, calm and steady. "Sarah, honey, come over after work. There's something I want to show you." That evening, Sarah sat in her mother's kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd grown up, where she'd done homework at the wooden table, where she'd shared countless meals and conversations. The familiar smell of her mother's cooking, the way the evening light filtered through the checkered curtains, the sound of the old clock ticking on the wall. Everything felt like a refuge from the chaos of her daily life. Her mother, Grace, began to speak with words that should shake us all awake. Throughout history, our ancestors leaned on the wisdom of simplicity. They understood that the most effective remedies often came from what was already within reach and were remarkably uncomplicated. Simple. But somewhere along the way, we decided simple wasn't enough. We decided that if it didn't come with a scientific backing, a celebrity endorsement, or a complicated process, it couldn't possibly work. We traded our birthright of natural wisdom for the false promise of complexity. Grace continued, "Your grandmother, my mother, she raised 7 children during the Great Depression. She worked from dawn to dusk, kept a garden, canned food for winter, managed a household without modern conveniences, and somehow always seemed at peace. You know what her secret was?" Sarah shook her head, fighting back tears that had been building for months. She started every single day the same way, with 5 simple things she kept in her kitchen. 5 things that cost almost nothing, but somehow kept her centered when the world was falling apart around her. We forgot that the most powerful forces in the universe are often the simplest ones. The sun rises every day. Simple. Water flows downhill. Simple. Seeds become trees. Simple. Love heals wounds. Simple. But in our lives, in our growth, in our relationship with ourselves, we convinced ourselves we needed complexity. So there Sarah was, feeling stuck, overwhelmed, weighed down by her own expectations. And society had told her, "Here's another course. Here's another system. Here's another program." But what if the answer had been sitting in her daily routine all along? Let me tell you about the real weight Sarah was carrying. And maybe, just maybe, it's the same weight you're carrying too. It wasn't just the physical weight of her responsibilities. It wasn't just the burden that made her avoid looking in the mirror of her true potential. It was the weight of disconnection. Sarah had disconnected from her body, treating it like a machine that should just work, instead of a living system that needed gentle care. She grabbed coffee on the run, ate lunch at her desk while answering emails, and fell into bed exhausted, without a moment of true rest. She'd wake up already thinking about her to-do list, her mind racing before her feet hit the floor. She disconnected from nature, living in artificial environments, consuming processed information, drinking from sources that didn't nourish her soul. Her days were spent under fluorescent lights, her evenings under blue screens. She couldn't remember the last time she'd watched a sunset or felt grass under her feet. She'd disconnected from time, expecting instant results, immediate gratification, overnight transformation. Every program she tried promised results in 30 days or less. When they didn't deliver, she moved on to the next one, never giving anything the space to actually work. And most tragically, she disconnected from wisdom, the wisdom her grandmother had lived by every single day. Grace pulled out an old photo album that night, showing Sarah pictures of her great-grandmother, Anna. In every photo, despite the hardships of that era, the Great Depression, World War II, raising children without modern conveniences, Anna's face held a serenity that Sarah hadn't felt in years. "Look at her," Grace said softly. She didn't have access to the internet, to endless information, to complicated systems. She didn't have a smartphone buzzing with notifications or hundreds of choices for everything. But she had something we've lost. She had trust in the simple. Grace shared something profound that night. She reflected on an ancient truth. We have been given every natural gift we need, every simple tool, every accessible resource. They are meant to nourish and heal us. But when was the last time Sarah had looked at her morning routine and seen medicine for her soul? When was the last time she had held a simple practice and felt grateful for its power to heal? When was the last time she had appreciated the basics as anything more than just the basics? Sarah realized she'd been taught to overlook the obvious, and in overlooking the obvious, she'd lost herself. Here's the painful truth about Sarah's fall, and maybe yours too. She started believing that if something was accessible, it couldn't be powerful. If something was affordable, it couldn't be effective. If something was simple, it couldn't be the answer. This belief had cost her dearly. Sarah calculated that in the past 18 months, she'd spent over $400 on transformation programs, apps, courses, and systems. Her credit card statements told the story of her desperation. $297 for the Ultimate Morning Routine Mastery Course, $189 monthly for the Wellness Transformation Program, $89 monthly for the Productivity Power System, $47 for the Mindful Motherhood app, $119 for the Life Organization Blueprint, $97 for the Stress-Free Living course. Each purchase had been made with hope, with the belief that this time would be different. This time, she'd found the answer. But still, she felt stuck. Still, she felt tired. Still, she felt disconnected from her own potential. Her family had started to notice her frustration. Her husband, Mark, would find her at 11 p.m. watching course videos on her laptop, taking notes on yet another system. Her teenage daughter, Emma, had sarcastically commented, "Mum's trying another life-changing program," when she saw Sarah's latest purchase notification. Even her youngest, 8-year-old Jake, had asked, "Mommy, why are you always looking for something on your phone? Are you lost?" Out of the mouths of babes. Sarah was lost in a maze of information, systems and solutions that promised everything but delivered confusion. The breaking point had been the 47-step morning routine. Sarah had tried to implement it for exactly 3 days. Day 1 took her 2 hours. Day 2, she gave up after step 23. Day 3, she didn't even start. "I felt like a failure," Sarah told her mother that night. "I couldn't even follow a morning routine correctly. What's wrong with me?" Grace took her daughter's hands. "Nothing is wrong with you, sweetheart. Something is wrong with a world that tells you that taking care of yourself should require a manual." That's when Grace mentioned the simple practice of mindful presence, something their ancestors did naturally, not as a trend, as a way of being. She talked about gentle rituals, the same comfort their mothers used to offer when they were struggling. She spoke of connecting with what was real, available in every moment, accessible to anyone willing to notice. "Your great-grandmother," Grace said, "she never called it a morning routine. She just called it taking care of herself. 5 simple things every single morning that kept her grounded when everything else was uncertain." These weren't exotic discoveries. They were forgotten friends. Sarah sat in her mother's kitchen that night, surrounded by the ghosts of women who had somehow figured out what she couldn't. Women who had faced greater challenges with fewer resources, yet had found a peace that seemed impossible in her modern life. "The irony," Grace continued, "is that in our search for better living, we've made living harder. In our quest for optimization, we've lost our humanity. In our desire for transformation, we've forgotten that we were never broken to begin with." Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of tension she didn't even know she'd been carrying. "Mum," Sarah finally asked, her voice barely a whisper, "what were those 5 things?" Grace smiled, the same smile that had comforted Sarah through scraped knees and broken hearts. "I'll show you tomorrow morning. Come here before work. Bring nothing but yourself." That night, Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Phone beside her, but for once, not reaching for it. For the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not the desperate hope that comes from finding another solution to buy, but the quiet hope that comes from remembering something you thought you'd lost forever. The next morning, Sarah arrived at her mother's house at 6 a.m. Grace was already awake, standing in her kitchen with 5 simple items laid out on the counter, like sacred tools. And then something beautiful happened in Sarah's story. Grace didn't promise her a miracle. She didn't claim she'd discovered something new. She didn't ask Sarah to abandon everything she knew. Instead, she invited her to remember. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. This ancient wisdom that Grace embraced wasn't about futility. It was about the eternal nature of truth. Grace began to explain each element with the reverence of someone sharing sacred knowledge. First, she said, holding up a simple glass, warm water. Not hot, not cold, but the temperature of comfort. Your great-grandmother believed that how you begin shapes everything that follows. She started every day by giving her body what it needed most: gentle hydration, warmth, and presence. Sarah watched as her mother filled the glass with water, not from the tap, but from a kettle that had been gently warmed. The simple act felt ceremonial, intentional. Second, brightness. Grace sliced a fresh lemon, and the scent filled the kitchen. She said sourness wakes up more than just your taste buds. It wakes up your spirit. But she never squeezed the lemon roughly. She honored it, thanked it for its gift. The third item was a small bottle of apple cider vinegar. Fermentation, Grace explained. Time and patience, creating something more powerful than what started. She said this reminded her that her own transformation wasn't supposed to be instant. It was supposed to be natural. Fourth was fresh ginger root. Grounding, Grace said, grating a small amount. When everything around her felt chaotic, this connected her back to the earth, back to her center. Finally, cinnamon. Sweetness, Grace smiled. Not the artificial kind that creates crashes, but the gentle sweetness that comes from nature. She said life was hard enough, without forgetting to add moments of joy. As Grace prepared the simple mixture, she explained the ritual. 5 minutes, Sarah. That's all. 5 minutes of presence, of gratitude, of gentle care for herself, before she gave her energy to everyone else. Sarah stared at the simple glass her mother handed her. That's it? She asked, thinking of all the complicated systems she'd tried to implement. That's it, Grace smiled. But Sarah, this isn't about the ingredients. This is about what you're choosing when you choose them. Grace continued. When you choose warm water over immediately grabbing your phone, you're choosing presence over distraction. When you choose fresh lemon over artificial energy drinks, you're choosing natural vitality over manufactured stimulation. When you choose to honor fermentation, you're choosing patience over urgency. When you choose grounding practices, you're choosing center over scatter. When you choose natural sweetness, you're choosing joy over survival. This is what return looks like. Not a dramatic overhaul of your entire life, not a complete abandonment of modern living, not a rejection of all progress, but a gentle turning toward what has always worked. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to address something. Many of you watching this might be thinking, this sounds too simple to work. That's exactly what Sarah thought. If you're feeling skeptical about the power of simplicity, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because I'm going to show you exactly how these simple choices created profound changes in Sarah's life. Grace asked Sarah for 10 days. 10 days. Not 10 months, not 10 years. 10 days. Just try it, Grace said. 10 days. If it changes nothing, you've lost nothing. If it changes something, you've gained everything. Sarah took the glass with shaking hands. The warm water soothed her throat. But more than that, it soothed something deeper. The lemon brightened her senses, but also seemed to brighten her mood. The apple cider vinegar reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen, of safety and wisdom. The ginger grounded her in the moment. in her body, in the present. The cinnamon made her smile for the first time in weeks. But more than the physical sensations, something else was happening. For 5 minutes, Sarah wasn't checking her phone. She wasn't thinking about her to-do list. She wasn't solving anyone else's problems. She was simply present with herself. "Mom," Sarah whispered, tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" Grace sat beside her daughter. "Because you wouldn't have been ready to hear it. You needed to exhaust all the complicated options first. You needed to learn that more isn't always better. Sometimes, sweetheart, we have to get completely lost before we're ready to come home." Day 1. Sarah felt skeptical. The practice seemed too easy, too basic. She kept waiting for the real part to begin. After her 5 minutes, she found herself reaching for her phone out of habit, but then stopped. She'd already started her day differently. Day 2. She almost forgot to do it, but remembered just as she was about to check her phone. The warm water felt like a gentle hug from the inside. She noticed she didn't feel as frantic getting her kids ready for school. Day 3. Something interesting happened. Sarah noticed she felt calmer during her commute. Usually, traffic was a source of stress and road rage. Today, she found herself taking deeper breaths, feeling more patient with other drivers. Day 4. Her husband, Mark, commented that she seemed different. "You seem lighter somehow," he said over dinner. "Less wound up." Sarah realized she hadn't snapped at anyone all day. Day 5. She found herself looking forward to those 5 quiet minutes. It was becoming less about the drink and more about the space she was creating for herself. Her teenage daughter Emma asked, "Mom, what are you doing different? You're not as stressed out lately." Day 6. The real test came when Emma had a complete meltdown about a failed test. Jake couldn't find his soccer cleats, and Mark was running late for an important meeting. Normally, Sarah would have joined the chaos, yelling and frantically searching. Instead, she remained centered, spoke calmly, and somehow everything got resolved without drama. Day 7. A profound realization hit her. She hadn't bought a single self-help program, downloaded any new apps, or signed up for any courses all week. The constant searching had simply stopped. Day 8. A co-worker, Jennifer, asked her directly, "What are you doing differently? You seem so peaceful lately. Are you on some new medication?" Sarah laughed, realizing that peace had become noticeable to others. Day 9. She woke up before her alarm, excited for her morning practice. This surprised her because she'd always been someone who hit the snooze button multiple times. Day 10. Understanding flooded through her. She'd been given something priceless, not the gift of a perfect life, not the gift of instant transformation, the gift of remembering that she was worth gentle care. The changes rippled outward in ways Sarah never expected. Her relationship with her children shifted. Instead of immediately trying to fix their problems, she learned to offer presence first. When Jake came home upset about a friend's behavior, instead of launching into advice mode, Sarah sat with him and listened. When Emma was stressed about college applications, instead of adding her own anxiety to the mix, Sarah remained calm and supportive. Her marriage began to transform. Mark had grown accustomed to Sarah being constantly stressed, always working on some new system to improve their lives. Now, she was simply more present with him. They started having actual conversations again, instead of just logistics discussions about who was picking up whom and when. At work, Sarah's colleagues began to notice changes. In meetings, she was more focused and less reactive. When problems arose, she approached them with calm problem-solving instead of panic. Her boss, Linda, pulled her aside one afternoon. "I don't know what you're doing differently, but you've become one of our most centered team members. You're handling stress better than people half your age." The most surprising change was with her elderly father, who lived in assisted living. Sarah's visits had always felt rushed and dutiful. She'd check his medications, tidy his apartment, and leave feeling guilty that she hadn't spent quality time with him. Now, she simply sat with him, listened to his stories, held his hand. "You remind me of your grandmother," he told her one afternoon. She had this same peaceful way about her. 3 months into her practice, Sarah made a shocking discovery. She calculated that she'd saved over $800 by not purchasing any new programs, apps, or courses. But more importantly, she'd gained something priceless: trust in herself. One evening, as she was preparing her simple mixture for the next morning, Mark sat down beside her. "I have to ask," he said, "what exactly is this costing us? Because whatever it is, it's worth it. You're like a completely different person. You're like yourself again." Sarah smiled, thinking of all the expensive programs that had promised transformation but delivered only confusion. "About 50 cents a day," she said, "and 5 minutes." Mark was quiet for a moment. "That's it?" "That's it." "But how? I mean, you spent thousands of dollars on those other programs." Sarah looked at her husband, this man who'd watched her struggle and search and spend for so long. "I think I was making it complicated because I didn't believe I deserved something simple. I thought transformation had to be hard, expensive, and complicated to be real. I thought I had to earn it somehow." The transformation wasn't just internal. Sarah's entire approach to life began to shift. When faced with challenges, instead of immediately seeking external solutions, she paused and asked herself, "What's the simplest way to approach this?" More often than not, the answer was already available to her. When Emma was struggling with anxiety about college, instead of researching expensive tutoring programs, Sarah simply made time to talk with her daughter every evening while they prepared dinner together. When Jake was having trouble with math, instead of hiring a costly tutor immediately, Sarah sat down with him and worked through problems patiently. When Mark was stressed about work, instead of suggesting he take an expensive stress management course, she simply created more peaceful evenings at home. 6 months later, Sarah's transformation was complete, but in a way she never could have imagined. She hadn't become a different person. She'd simply remembered who she was, underneath all the anxiety, overwhelm, and constant searching. I want to pause here and share something important with you. Sarah's story isn't unique. There are thousands of people who've discovered that the solutions they were desperately seeking were already within reach. If you're ready to stop overcomplicating your own life, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what simple practice you're going to try for the next 10 days. 1 year later, Sarah was asked to speak at her company's annual wellness event. People had noticed her transformation and wanted to know her secret. She stood before a room of overwhelmed, stressed-out colleagues and told them Grace's story. "How much did this cost?" someone asked from the back of the room. "About $3, Sarah replied, "and 5 minutes a day." The room was silent. She could see the disbelief on their faces. "But," Sarah continued, "it cost me something else. It cost me the belief that I needed to be complicated to be valuable. It cost me the addiction to constant improvement. It cost me the exhaustion of always searching for something better. It cost me the story that I was broken and needed fixing." "And what did you gain?" another person asked. Sarah smiled, thinking of her morning practice, of her children joining her in the kitchen sometimes, of her husband's morning hugs, of the peace she felt in her own skin. I gained myself back. A woman in the front row raised her hand. But surely there's more to it than that. I mean, I've tried simple approaches before, and they never work. Sarah nodded. I understand that skepticism. I felt it too. But here's what I learned. It's not about the ingredients. It's about the choice you're making when you choose them. When you choose to start your day with gentle care for yourself, instead of immediately diving into demands and obligations, you're setting a tone for everything that follows. She continued, the practice itself is simple, but the implications are profound. You're choosing to believe that you're worth gentle care. You're choosing to trust that effective doesn't have to mean complicated. You're choosing to remember that your ancestors thrived with much less complexity than we think we need. Another hand went up. How do we know this will work for us? You're just one person. Sarah had anticipated this question. You're right. I am just one person. But I'm not unique. I'm a mother, a wife, a daughter, an employee. Just like many of you. I was overwhelmed, anxious, and constantly searching for solutions, just like many of you. The difference isn't in who I am, it's in what I was willing to try. She paused, looking around the room. How many of you have spent money on programs, courses, or systems that promise to change your life? Almost every hand went up. How many of those actually created lasting change? Most of the hands went down. Here's what I learned. The problem isn't that those programs were bad. The problem is that they were trying to add more to lives that were already overfull. They were trying to optimize chaos instead of creating calm. They were treating symptoms instead of addressing the root issue. Which is, someone called out, that we've forgotten how to trust the simple. We've been conditioned to believe that if something is accessible and affordable, it can't be powerful. We've been taught that transformation has to be hard to be real. We've bought into the myth that we need experts to teach us how to take care of ourselves. After her talk, several colleagues approached Sarah privately. Jennifer, her co-worker, who had first noticed her change, said, I've been thinking about what you said. I spent $400 last month on a productivity course that I haven't even finished. The idea that I could create change with something from my kitchen feels almost too good to be true. Sarah smiled. That's exactly how I felt. But Jennifer, what if it is true? What if the solution really is that accessible? What do you have to lose by trying? Dr. Martinez, the company's wellness coordinator, pulled Sarah aside. I have to say, I was skeptical when you said $3 in 5 minutes, but I've watched your transformation over the past year. You've become one of our most resilient employees. Would you be willing to lead a workshop for interested colleagues? Sarah agreed, and 2 weeks later, she found herself in a conference room with 15 co-workers, teaching them Grace's simple practice. I want to be clear about something, Sarah began. I'm not here as an expert. I'm here as someone who was exactly where many of you are now, overwhelmed, anxious, spending money on solutions that never seemed to stick. She walked them through each element, explaining not just what to do, but why it mattered. The warm water isn't just about hydration, she explained. It's about choosing to begin your day with gentleness instead of shock. Most of us grab our phones immediately or rush into coffee that jolts our nervous system. Warm water is a choice to ease into your day. The lemon isn't just about vitamin C, it's about choosing brightness and freshness over the stale energy of yesterday's worries. The apple cider vinegar isn't just about digestion, it's about honoring natural processes and remembering that transformation takes time. The ginger isn't just about soothing your stomach. It's about choosing to ground yourself in the present moment instead of immediately spinning into future anxieties. The cinnamon isn't just about taste. It's about choosing to add sweetness to your own experience instead of waiting for life to become sweet on its own. 3 months later, Dr. Martinez reported that the 15 people who had attended Sarah's workshop showed measurable improvements in stress levels, job satisfaction, and overall well-being. More importantly, their healthcare costs had decreased and their productivity had increased. The most interesting finding, Dr. Martinez told Sarah, is that the people who stuck with your practice were 40% less likely to purchase additional wellness programs or stress management courses. They seemed to have found what they were looking for. Sarah wasn't surprised. When you remember that you already have everything you need, you stop desperately searching for what you don't have. The practice had become more than a morning routine for Sarah. It had become a philosophy that guided her approach to every area of life. When problems arose, she asked herself, "What's the simplest, most natural way to approach this?" When she felt overwhelmed, she returned to basics instead of seeking more complex solutions. When her family faced challenges, she created space and presence instead of immediately trying to fix or solve. This is what true transformation looks like. Not a dramatic before and after that makes for good social media, but a gentle return to what has always been true. Not an addition of more complicated systems, but a subtraction of unnecessary complexity. Not a purchase that promises to change everything, but a practice that reminds you that you were never broken to begin with. So, tomorrow morning, when you wake up, before you check your phone, before you dive into the complexity of your day, before you overwhelm yourself with all the things you think you should be doing, consider starting with simple presence. Not because it's magic, but because it's a choice. A choice to begin your day with gentleness instead of urgency. A choice to trust the simple instead of seeking the complicated. A choice to care for yourself with what's available instead of waiting for what's perfect. Sarah's story teaches us that transformation doesn't always look like a dramatic overhaul. Sometimes it looks like gentle presence. Sometimes it looks like choosing consistency over perfection. Sometimes it looks like trusting that you are worth simple care. 2 years after that first morning in Grace's kitchen, Sarah received a call that would test everything she'd learned. Grace had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. Just as she'd learned to value her mother's wisdom, that wisdom was beginning to fade. But here's what Sarah discovered. The practice Grace had shared wasn't just about the ingredients or even the routine. It was about a way of being that had become part of Sarah's DNA. When she sat with her mother during doctor's appointments, when she helped Grace organize her medications, when she watched her mother struggle to remember things that had once been automatic, Sarah remained centered in a way that amazed even herself. "I would have fallen apart 2 years ago," Sarah told Mark one evening after a particularly difficult day with Grace. "I would have been researching every possible treatment, buying books about dementia care, overwhelming myself with information and solutions. Instead, I'm just present with her." Grace's condition meant that the 5-ingredient practice became impossible for her to continue independently. But Sarah made a beautiful discovery. The practice was portable, shareable, and adaptable. She began preparing the morning mixture for both of them, sitting quietly with her mother each morning, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes sharing memories. On the days when Grace's memory was particularly unclear, she would still respond to the warmth of the water, the brightness of the lemon, the familiar smells of ginger and cinnamon. "It's like the practice reaches a part of her that the dementia can't touch," Sarah observed. The final lesson of Sarah's story isn't about the specific ingredients or the exact routine. It's about remembering that healing can be gentle, that effective can be simple, and that powerful can be accessible. It's about trusting that you already have everything you need, not just in your kitchen, but within yourself. If Sarah's story has moved you, if you're ready to stop overcomplicating your own transformation, I need 3 things from you right now. First, hit that like button to show me this message resonated. Second, subscribe to this channel because I share stories like this every week, stories about finding extraordinary wisdom in ordinary moments. And third, tell me in the comments, what's one simple practice you're going to try for the next 10 days? Your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to read. This is your invitation to return, not to a place you've never been, but to a wisdom you've always carried, to the knowing that growth can be gentle, that effective can be simple, that powerful can be accessible, and that you, exactly as you are, with exactly what you have available to you right now, you are enough to begin. The return to simplicity starts with a single choice. What will yours be? Remember, in a world that profits from your confusion, choosing simplicity is rebellion. In a society that monetizes your insecurity, trusting the basic is revolution. And in your own life, where complexity has masked the truth for too long, coming home to what works is the most courageous act of all. The invitation is open. The wisdom is within you. The time is now. Welcome home.